What's going on, my babies? Welcome back to another episode of the Spiritual Word. As always, I apologize for any noises in the background, anything in advance, or anything of that nature in advance. And as always, before I start, I like to start these off with a disclaimer by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research to come to your own conclusions, to have your own answers, to make your own decisions. And I believe in your ability to do so and to be your own person. And before I start these, I want to say that I have a audio version of the podcast anywhere you can find audio podcasts, and I have a video version of the podcast on YouTube. They're both named The Spiritual Word. I'm your host, Jackie. I upload Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. If science, psychology, self-help, spirituality, and philosophy are things that you're interested in, those are my main 5 topics. And if those are things you're interested in, then I recommend subbing or following whatever platform you're finding me on. And with that being said, I'm jumping right into today's episode. So I'm going a little bit fast just because both of my recording devices are low battery, and sometimes I do these over. So, I'm just trying to go fast. So yesterday I was inspired to do a self-love episode. And the reason that I say I was inspired is because I have been posting on my social medias as like a promotion that if you're interested in these topics, that you go find either my podcast or my Twitch, because I stream on Twitch pretty much every single day. And yesterday somebody ran into, or they clicked on one of the episodes or on one of my videos, and on there was my Twitch link, and this person just inspired me because they went into my Twitch and they're just chatting with me on, while they're viewing, basically what I was playing. I was playing a game called Warzone, and they were like, I see that on your social media you talk about being a self-love coach, and I put that on my TikTok just because I feel like that's what I promote the most on TikTok. So that's what I basically, have my undertag being, that I help people love themselves. And this person was like, "Do you have any tips for me?" And I thought that that was very inspirational just because it was something that was unlikely for me, at least. It was someone random who clicked on my video, and it kind of just reminded me of why I do what I do. And I think that's what inspired me the most. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in today's episode is what they were asking me about. And what this person had asked me specifically was tips for how to have self-confidence and how to not rely on people as much. So that's what I want to talk about. So there's a difference between not relying on people for like an emotional standard and not relying on people at all. And I think there's different ways in which you can rely on people. So you have to recognize what you mean by that. And you should never not ever depend on anybody, but like, how do I say this? There's a difference between being independent and being hyper independent, and I think you should draw the line for yourself when it comes to what independence looks like for you. If it means that you don't really, ask for, favors and stuff like that, then that could be the line where you just don't ask for favors. Or if it's something along the lines of, when I'm emotionally irregulated, how do I not go to somebody else to emotionally regulate myself? And I think you have to be very clear on what you mean by how to not rely on other people. I think in this context, this said person was using other people as their confidence. And I think what my best advice that I could give for you to not rely on anybody for your self-confidence is to remember that you are worthy of existence because you're here. And if you weren't worthy of existence, you wouldn't be here. And I think people they get caught up in the fact that maybe nature and reality is random, quotation marks, random, and their idea that everything is just lucky and everything is just by chance and everything is just by, what are the odds? That is the odds. And I think that people forget that there's so many, when when you have the talk with your parents, they talk about how babies are made, and I think people underestimate the chances, the odds of you being picked out of all of those different fertile, things. And obviously, I can't really go into detail about it, but I'm not going to go into detail about it. So I think people misconceive the fact that it's not by luck or by chance that you're here. It's by persistency because you fought to be here. And whatever context you want to take that in, you could take that into context and be like, oh yeah, bullshit. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, they do look at that and they're like, oh, bullshit. But look at science and look at psychology and look at consciousness. Because if you look at all these different things, there's a multitude of different factors that play into what's here, how it came to be, and the fact that it looks like chance sporadically. But I think once you come into realization for yourself, you realize that nothing is by chance. And I myself don't believe in coincidences. So, and I'm not religious. I don't go to church or anything like that. So believe me when I say that you're not going to listen to what I say until it hits you. Like it hits you. It slaps you in the face. And it's like, you have to realize how special you are. And I think that confidence comes from not feeling special. Or like the lack of confidence comes from not feeling special. When in reality, you are special. Because what are the odds that I'm here sitting down talking to you through this device, these miracle devices, and I'm floating on a rock at the end of the day? What is the chance of that? You know what I mean? And I think you have to have an open mind when it comes down to the reality of your situation, because it's not that you're relying on other people for confidence, it's that you're relying on their validation for how you feel about yourself. And if you feel like shit and other people validate that you aren't, you know, anything of value to their life, then that's validating your feelings of not feeling confident. And life is going to present to you whatever you give it attention. So, like, if I sit here and I feel bad for myself and this is what I feel on a day-to-day basis, even though I'm not consciously choosing to feel like shit, but when I make the conscious effort to not feel like that, when I make the conscious effort to do the opposite of what that is and to feel good about myself and to feel like I'm worthy and to feel like I'm special and to feel like I am of value in this reality, regardless of whether I'm, making the most money or if I'm the best looking or whatever the best is, because recognize that you are your best. And there's no such thing as comparing yourself to anybody else. And I think that that's also where your lack of confidence comes from. When you're constantly comparing yourself to that person and people are constantly comparing you to that person, and you're constantly reminded of all these other people who are doing this better than you and who are doing this even on a bigger scale than you and who are actually making a difference and who are actually doing this and who are actually putting whatever the fuck. It's not about the actual, like, work. I don't know how to explain this. It's not about what you actually physically bring to the table. It's about what you actually experience on a regular basis. And if you feel like crap because your reality constantly feeds you crap, you have to do your best to not feed that back. And there is things like, situations that seem to be unfair, but I genuinely think that you wouldn't be given something if you weren't able to handle it. And the more you see yourself as incapable, the more you see yourself as weak, the more you see yourself as less perfect than that other person, less pretty than that person, less handsome than that person, less whatever than that person, that's what you're gonna get. Less. You're gonna feel the lack because that's what your abundance is. And I talk about all these things in a spiritual context, which I'm gonna move away from for this episode from this point, just because I feel like when I talk in a spiritual manner, people don't really pay attention to that because it's not really effective in your day-to-day life to think the way that I think, especially if you don't think the way that I think. So, how to have confidence and how to not rely on other people to give you that validation. It really comes down to, how can I make myself feel confident? And remind myself that I don't have to be the best at anything. I don't have to be the best looking in the room. I don't have to be the smartest. I don't have to be the funniest. I don't have to bring people of value to be what I see to be the best. And not because, of any other reason than because I want to just simply exist and I want my existence to be enough. Because the reason that I feel like people don't feel confident is because they're always trying to be enough, right? You're always trying to be enough for this person, for that person, for school, for, home, for work, for whatever. You're trying to be enough for whatever that thing you see as you're not enough. You're not enough. And you have to accept the fact that existing is your enough. And I think that people forget that, like, you can be doing the bare minimum, but it's really doing the bare maximum. And there's this quote by Steve Lacy is this person is a artist, so he creates music. And he talks about how putting in the least amount of effort always got him farther in life. And I think it was because it's the flow and the rhythm of life. He goes with the wave rather than against the wave. And I think that most people, when they're trying to have confidence, when they seem to have no confidence, you're going against the wave of your reality. And going against the wave of your reality is hard. And sometimes you have to accept where you lie, but it doesn't mean you're defeated. Just because I choose to ride this wave doesn't mean that the wave is crashing on me and taking me. It means that I need to learn how to surf on this wave. And when I surf on this wave, I can go any direction I choose because now I have control over where I want to go. I have direction. I can choose my direction. And having confidence is literally just about caring about yourself. It's about sitting down in the moments where you feel the least confident and sitting there and accepting where you are, but not taking it as defeat. Accepting where you are and knowing where to move. It's kind of like if I was insecure because I feel confident because my teeth are not straight, then it means in those moments where I look at my teeth in the mirror, I accept where I am and I choose something about it. Do I want to get braces? Or do I want to accept the fact that these are my teeth? And it's not a defeated moment. You know what I mean? And I feel like people who don't want to accept themselves aren't even enough for themselves in that point, in that moment in time. If you don't want to choose yourself, you're currently not enough for yourself. And you see yourself as not good enough for yourself. But you are just doing your best in any point in time, and everybody's just doing their best. This is where the compassion, the self love comes from. You have to be compassionate with yourself because, one, you know how much you're trying. And if you're not trying at all, then you have permission to beat yourself up because you're not trying at all. You know what I mean? Like if I was sitting here and I was crying about the fact that I don't have braces and then I continue to not make an effort towards braces, then of course I can sit there and be mean to myself because I want this thing, but I'm not going after it. Of course I have, this ambition, but if I'm not going after it, then yeah, I'm going to be mean to myself because I see this thing that I want and I'm not doing anything about it. And I think it's that type of thing. Or like if I was sitting here and I was crying because I don't know, because I don't really have, a chin like that. Or because I'm overweight or because I'm underweight or because, whatever the case is, for a lot of people it's a multitude of different things. And I'm not doing anything about it. I feel like that's where you get stuck in this loop of disliking yourself and you get stuck in this loop of not having confidence because you're not doing anything to change that. You really have to genuinely care about yourself. You really have to genuinely love yourself and accept where you are in order to move forward. Because accepting something doesn't mean that you're defeated. If I accept something, it doesn't mean that I don't have the power to change that said thing. And because I know that I have the power to change it, I'm going to be compassionate and help myself achieve that thing. And if that thing for me is self-confidence and self-love, it means that every time that I want to run to somebody to validate that I'm enough and I want somebody to tell me that everything is going to be okay, I do that for myself. And I don't rely on anybody else except for me to do that very thing. So first recognize where the line is, where you're drawing your own line because only you know yourself. And also recognize that nobody's going to tell you what you need to hear except for you in those moments. Like in those moments where you feel like you are the ugliest person in the room, where you feel like you're the dumbest person in the room, or where you feel like you're not the funniest in the room. Whatever the ist, whatever the word before the ist is for you, then, in those moments is when you need to validate yourself. And in those moments of validating yourself, you will gain more self confidence because you will recognize that you are enough for yourself and that you are enough to just be here and you are worthy of existence and you are worthy of all these things. And you don't have to be the funniest or the fastest or the smartest or the ist. You don't have to be the best at anything because you're the best you. And when you are the best you feel the best because there's nobody else who's going to be you. Nobody else in the world is ever going to be in your skin. Ever. You are a moment in history that can never be written over. You are somebody who is going to be in history in a moment of time where that can never be done over. You don't get a redo. Appreciate this one. And when you appreciate this one, you appreciate yourself because you know that there's only one of you. And you don't take yourself for granted and you don't beat yourself up for the things that you could be doing better because okay, if I could be doing this better, let's approach this with a softness. And when I approach this with a softness, I actually want to do better. And when I approach this with the softness, I gain ambition and I gain the drive and I gain all of these masculine qualities to get me to do these things. And I think that it's even harder for guys, especially in society like my society, because you don't really talk about your feelings and stuff like that. And same thing could be said about girls, but I feel like girls have a little bit of leeway because they can talk about their feelings. It's just whether or not they open up. And I think it's the same thing with guys, but guys have a lot more caution when it comes to those things because you don't feel safe. And if you talk about your feelings, you're looked at as weak. And I feel like that's the majority of people in my society or, in my little world or, in the things that I've observed is that if you don't share your feelings or if you do share your feelings, you're weak. And if you don't share your feelings, nobody really knows what's going on. So it's kind of hard to balance those two things, but you have to be open with yourself. You have to be willing to express how you feel to yourself. And if that means sitting down and meditating and sitting down and thinking, like when you're in your meditation, it doesn't mean don't think about anything. It means concentrate on one specific thing. What do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on achieving this thing, or do you want to focus on what's going on in your mind? You want to emotionally regulate yourself? What do you want to do? What's the focal point for this? And if you sit there and you're like, okay, I want to see how I feel today. I want to check in with myself. And I want to see if my confidence is going up from me just loving myself, from me just appreciating where I am. And recognize that when you are at a lack, you're at the bottom, right? When you have a lack of something, you feel like you're at the bottom of that thing, that specific thing, whether it's, whatever you feel a lack of, whether that's money, whether that's love, whether that's friendship, whether that's community, whether that's self-awareness, whatever. You start right here at the bottom, and the only place to go from here is up because you're already at the bottom. So, take everything with a grain of salt because I can't do the things for you. You have to be willing to do the things for you. But recognize that self-love and self-confidence are essentially two things wrapped in one. And when you love yourself, you're more confident because you will push yourself in a very nurturing, in a very healthy, in a very, very positive, in a very constructive manner. And same thing goes for anything in your life. So if you feel like you have a tendency to look for other people to validate that for you, to validate your looks, your brains, your level of operation, your success, then you have to sit there and really look at, do you feel like those things are true for you? Because even when other people validate those things for you, it doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't satisfy you. This is why you go back to other people. This is why you get caught in this loop of, I don't feel confident, let me go ask somebody else, to see if I should feel confident. Do I look good today? And you ask that a lot. It's not just one time and you're done forever. And I feel like this is like a really good kind of fix to that thing. I don't think that you'll ever really fix your insecurities, but I think you can get to a point where you're at an understanding of why they're there, how they came to be, accept them, and set them free. I don't think that it's ever going to be something that you just completely get rid of, but I think it'll just be something like, oh yeah, I remember when I felt like that. You know what I mean? And I think besides all these things, you know yourself best. And in order for you to be confident, I genuinely think that you just have to care about yourself. And there's nothing anybody could say or do to get you to feel confident, especially because if I told you this is how to be confident, these are 10 tips to be confident, and you do those 10 tips, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a guaranteed work or a guaranteed fix, quotation marks, fix for you, because everybody is so different. You have to see what works for you. For some people, the toughness and, the brutal force behind those actions is what works for them. And for some people, softness is what works for them. And for some people, it's a balance of the two. And for some people, it's, either one or a different thing. So you really have to figure out what works for you and use that to the best of your ability. And regardless, I think what also has helped me in my specific journey is recognizing when I'm doing that in moments where I'm doing that. And what this means is like in moments where I go outside and I'm looking and I'm like, oh my god, I'm wearing the same shirt as yesterday. And I'm like, people are gonna think that I'm dirty, people are gonna think this, people are gonna think that. I sit there and I'm like, you know what? It's not their life. They can judge me because they're outside of me. It doesn't mean that their judgments are factual. It doesn't mean that I should listen to what they're saying because they're just saying something. I can choose to listen to them and I can choose not to. And in moments where I'm outside and that's happening and I caught myself in that moment and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that person's probably judging me." And I sit there and I pause and I ponder and I look at my shirt and I'm like, "You know what? Is this something that's really going to matter in a couple years?" And for me, that works for me, right? Another thing that also works for me is sitting down and being like, okay, if that person's judging me, that says a lot about them. They're judgmental if they're judging me for something so simple as wearing the same shirt twice. Because we all have clothes that we repeat, unless, you're absolutely filthy rich and you have no cares in the world. And so you just throw away your shirts and your clothes after wearing them one time. And, that's pretty wasteful in my opinion. You know what I mean? So I sit there and I'm like, if they judge me for how I look and how I'm dressed, this is a lot about them. And I could judge them just as much as they're judging me back. And I can sit there and I can fight fire with fire, but that doesn't really do anything. You know what I mean? So I can sit there and just accept their judgment. It doesn't mean that I'm defeated. It means that I know myself well enough to not let their words get to me. Because at the end of the day, why are you judging me for something so small? Because if anything, that says so much about you. You know what I mean? So, in moments where I catch myself doing that very thing, I sit there and I feel good because I caught myself doing that thing and because I did that thing in the first place. Like, I remember the first time that I caught myself, like, hysterically, like, breaking down because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm a failure and, like, all these different things, and I feel like crap, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm really young and, like, dumb, and I don't know if I'm doing anything right. And then I sat there and I was like, the fact that I care so much means that whatever work I do put into something is gonna be my heart and my soul. And regardless, I'm here. And it's not about the legacy that I leave behind. It's not about the life that I live. It's about right here and right now, as stupid and as cliche and as, whatever that might seem to be. It's about taking it a day at a time. And when I caught myself doing that, like parenting myself in that moment of like, oh my gosh, like I'm hysterically breaking down, I felt so proud of myself. And there's no other greater feeling than that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm doing the thing. And every single day and every single moment that you catch yourself in the moments where you don't feel as confident and you sit there and you're like, okay, it's fine, because this, because this, because I know, because whatever. You sit there and you feel so fucking proud of yourself for even doing that because you've never done that before. And it's a new experience, and it's growth, and it's development, and it's expansion, and it's something that nobody can ever take away from you. And yeah, I think that's it. So I always end these really abruptly, but basically how I get myself personally to feel more confident is to do those very things. Like catch myself when I feel a lack of confidence. Like if I go outside and I'm like, oh, if I go up to that person, I know I'm gonna get rejected. Who cares? Who cares? I care about myself enough to know that their opinion of me will not sway how I feel about myself. And if I feel good about myself, it means that if I go up and I do that, it's not gonna stop me from still feeling good. Because the only person that gets to make me feel good is me. And not how you feel, not your nice, beautiful, wonderful comments. And although those things are very, loving and warm and, beautiful, it's not the only thing that exists. And so when other things come about that are just, things that are there, I accept those and understand those, but I don't take them as everything. And I think that sometimes that's what we have a tendency to do, and we overlook a lot of the things that could be beneficial to us. And with that being said, I'm gonna end this here just because I already went over the time by 8 minutes. I was gonna make this 20 minutes, but I can never just not do that. So, with that being said, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. I hope that you love yourself and accept yourself for who you are, because who you are is perfect in every single way, even if you don't see it that way. And I genuinely think that creation doesn't make mistakes. And with that being said, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.